Hey, what's up guys, it's Marf and welcome back to another Asphalt 9 video. Today we are taking a look at the Volkswagen Electric R. This is the third highest rated D-Class car in the game, and I recently maxed it out through the Clash store, and I have one epic import part applied to the top speed, which we'll talk about in a bit. But again, like I said, I maxed this car out through the Clash store. So yes, you can actually just buy blueprints from the Clash store for this car. And because it is a D-Class car, the blueprint costs are actually not that high. So at the same time that I have been buying blueprints for the Agera RS, which I will eventually make a video about later on, I also started buying blueprints for this car and maxed it out. I believe at the beginning I started at only 1 star, and within like a couple of months I just casually brought it up to max. So I'm sure if you are dedicating your currency to this car, you can max it out a lot quicker than I did, but at the end of the day, it's actually not that expensive. And we'll talk about why I recommend only going for this car with the Clash currency at the end. But let's talk about the performance. You only need one quick glance at the stats of this car to realize that its main standout feature is acceleration. For all intents and purposes, it basically is 88 acceleration, which is really nuts, especially for D-Class. We've had a lot of electric cars added to the game recently that have in the high 80s of acceleration, and this is certainly one of them. So at the beginning of the races that you'll see in this video, within the first couple of seconds, I'm pretty much in first place, with only a couple of exceptions with some other electric cars. So especially for Bronze and Silver League, you are going to finish first place a lot of the times, especially if you're playing a shorter track, whether it's Buenos Aires, or I've noticed this a lot in some of the Shanghai maps, but also, you know, Osaka. Any shorter variant of track, you will just finish first place because you accelerate so quickly. Now, the downside to this car, I would say, is mainly the top speed. At max, with only one epic import part, you are looking at 187, which is sort of mid-range for D-Class because, you know, you have the TVR Griffith, but you also have just a ton of D-Class cars that max out in the 170s. But for C-Class, especially going up against like Vencer Sarths and Araneras, those go well above 200 miles an hour. So you'll notice starting around the maybe 60% mark, these cars start to catch up to me. So again, on those shorter tracks, it's pretty easy to finish in first place just because you start off so far ahead. But especially on those top speed oriented tracks like Himalayas, Cairo, and on those longer variants of different tracks, you will end up in, you know, maybe third place or even last place because all of the other cars catch up. So when I'm playing in Bronze and Silver League, that really isn't too much of a problem. Again, on those lengthier tracks, those Araneras and Vencers are going to catch up eventually, but for the most part, most players aren't driving those cars, and I do come in first place a lot, even while hitting walls, which we'll talk about handling in a second here. But once I got to Gold League, that really stopped. Now, I did get some first place finishes in Gold League, but some of the other drivers were still driving C-Class cars while I was driving an electric R. So your mileage may vary if you're trying out this car in Gold League. I wasn't able to progress past Gold League in this car just simply due to the fact that pretty much every other B-Class car has a much higher top speed, and some of them, like the Huracan, also have pretty decent acceleration stats. So even though for the first maybe like 20 to 30% of the race I am far ahead, those other B-Class cars catch up really quickly. So I would say this car is really good, not only for Bronze League of course, but it can actually do pretty decently in Silver League because of the acceleration. But once you get to Gold League, it is really going to be tough. So I wouldn't recommend this car if you're trying to stretch it past Gold League. Now I can imagine for some events that require D-Class cars and have shorter track lengths, this would be an absolute monster, again, due to that acceleration. But anything for higher top speeds, you're just going to want something like the TVR Griffith, of course. So for multiplayer, I would say only in Classic this makes sense because of its high acceleration. You're not really worried, you know, about those cars catching up pretty quickly. But in Ghost Slipstream, because everyone has Shockwave all the time, you're going to get blown past by top speed cars pretty darn quickly because they are going to get up to their top speed a lot quicker through Shockwave. So just touching on the handling a bit before I end off the video, I want to say I was expecting a lot more with this car, and unfortunately the handling of this car does leave a little bit to be desired. You'll see me bumping into walls, and while you're on normal single nitro, it isn't that bad. For whatever reason, in Shockwave and perfect nitro, this car just becomes a boat, which is really disappointing because you'll see me in this video, I expect to get around a corner pretty confidently in perfect nitro, and sometimes that just doesn't happen. Now the drifting isn't too bad, although you'll notice the car freaks out a little bit when you're trying to drift, which is pretty funny. So it's not too bad, especially compared to other D-class cars, but it really isn't the best, and you do lose quite a bit of speed if you maintain a drift for too long. So before I give my recommendation about this car, I do want to touch on the handling a bit, because based on the look of this car, and the stat isn't that bad, I was honestly expecting much better handling. Because the top speed is so low, I figured, okay, it should have both decent acceleration and handling. And the handling isn't abysmal, it just turns into a boat when you go into perfect nitro or shockwave, which is really annoying, especially because for some cars, perfect nitro actually improves their handling performance around corners, but for this car, that is not the case. So you'll see me bump into a lot of walls in this video just due to the fact that visually, this car looks like it could get around any corner, no problem. But in practice, it is really tough to get around a lot of corners just in perfect nitro. So sometimes I just won't have perfect nitro. I'll go only single tap nitro or just no nitro at all. So yeah, that is a bit of a problem with this car that you'll have to get used to. Now, getting out of corners with that acceleration definitely helps. But again, that handling is just something you want to be aware of, because you don't want to be bumping into walls if you don't have to. So overall, I would definitely recommend this car, especially if you are an advanced user and maybe you have the Jesko, you're already buying blueprints for the Agera. I would spare 1 or 2, blueprints for this car each week and just over time max it out. It is a pretty good D-class car to have, especially if you run into any events that require a handling or acceleration focused D-class car. This is going to demolish anything else, especially on those shorter tracks like I mentioned, and you can use it pretty darn well in Classic League to get to middle of Gold League. Again, I don't think you're going to really get past Gold League in this car just due to the fact that the other cars have much higher top speed, but it can do pretty well, especially in Classic Season. So I would recommend at least getting some blueprints for this car every week, especially from the Clash store, but I don't think it would be worth it to spend tokens on. You might want to save that for another car. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this review of the Volkswagen Electric R. Let me know your thoughts about this car in the comment section down below. Would you go for this car only in the Clash store? Would you prioritize something else? Again, I would definitely want to hear your thoughts in the comments, and I will catch you guys in the next one.